My brother's rich girlfriend spent the whole dinner mocking my clothes, my job, and the way I talk while my wife squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't." When she started bragging about her latest deal, I picked up my phone. What happened next ended three things at once. She called my accent quaint. That was the word she used. Quaint. The way you'd describe a roadside fruit stand you have no intention of stopping at. Tilting her wine glass toward me across my mother's dining table, candlelight catching the red inside until it looked almost black, smile arranged into the specific shape of a woman who has never once wondered whether the room wanted to hear from her. Very heartland, Camille said. Eastern Kentucky, right? You don't hear that in serious rooms anymore. My family laughed. My mother first. Diane Whitmore never missed a cue when impressive money was speaking. My father gave a low chuckle, the kind that said, "We're all thinking it, she just said it." My brother Grant grinned into his glass, proud of what he had brought home, the way you'd be proud of a car that turns heads in a parking lot, and my wife Becca pressed my hand under the table. "Please," she whispered, lips barely moving. "Don't make a scene." 5 words, soft enough that nobody else caught them, sharp enough that I felt each one separately, like fingers pressing a bruise that never quite healed. I looked down at my plate. Green beans laid out in a neat bundle beside pork so pale and perfect it looked painted. My mother's wedding china, the crystal glasses, the heavy silverware that made every meal feel like an audition. I had been auditioning for this family my whole life. I smiled. Camille's smile widened, satisfied. She thought I had accepted my place at the table. She had no idea she was sitting at mine. Let me tell you who I was in that room before I tell you what I did in it. My name is Nolan Whitmore. I'm 31 years old. In my family, I am introduced as our steady one, a phrase my mother delivers with a soft, apologetic smile, like she's explaining a load-bearing wall in an otherwise beautiful house. Grant is introduced first, always. This is my oldest, commercial real estate, brilliant with clients. Then the pivot toward me, the dimming of the lights. And this is Nolan, our steady one. Steady, in my family's language, means safe. Gray, the man who leaves before dessert because he has work in the morning. Grant arrived everywhere in cologne and tailored navy, and a bright weaponized charm that made rooms rearrange themselves around him. He knew developers, club presidents, men who said market cycle while holding bourbon. He could make ordering an appetizer look like closing a deal. I knew freight routing algorithms, database failover, contract compliance, and how to keep my hand steady when a server crashed at 2:40 a.m. and 38 employees were depending on the fix. But to my parents, I fixed computers. Fixing computers meant password resets, printer jams, reminding grown adults to turn it off and back on again. The truth was something they had never thought to ask about. 6 years before that dinner, I quit a corporate job that had been quietly sanding me down to a smooth, agreeable shape. I built a company called Rootline Systems from our kitchen table. Old hoodie, gas station coffee, a laptop with a cracked hinge that had to be opened with 2 hands. The idea was software that helped shipping companies move freight without drowning in spreadsheets and phone calls, and gut feelings dressed up as 30 years of experience. The first version was genuinely ugly. The dashboard loaded like it was embarrassed. The color scheme looked like a county tax website. I cried over code I didn't understand, pitched investors who checked their phones before I'd finished sitting down, and once spent an entire Saturday answering customer support emails alone because I was the entire support department. 52 investors said no. The 53rd asked me one question no one in my family had ever thought to ask. What do you need to scale? I can still feel that room. Beige carpet, burnt coffee, rain streaking the window behind her, my own voice shaking as I answered. Walking outside afterward and standing under the awning with my laptop pressed against my chest, laughing and wiping my eyes while delivery trucks hissed through puddles because something had finally cracked open in the right direction. Our first real client was a regional trucking company whose dispatcher cried on the phone, actual tears, because the software gave her Saturdays back. I printed that email and taped it inside my desk drawer, and on the bad nights, the nights the servers went sideways and the bank account went thin, I opened the drawer and read it again. Rootline grew quietly after that, then not so quietly. By the night Camille Hartwell sat at my mother's table, my company had 38 employees, offices in 3 cities, over 200 freight and logistics clients, and acquisition discussions with Crestpoint Capital Partners that had been running for 5 months and valued us somewhere between $45 and $70 million. My family knew none of it. Becca knew pieces. She knew I worked late. She knew I took calls I stepped outside for. She knew I had a business account and a lawyer named Renata who called more often than most friends. She never asked for more than that. I had told myself that was respect, that Sunday dinner was when I understood it was something else entirely. Grant called 3 days before to announce he was bringing someone. She's different, he said, breathless in the way he got about new acquisitions, private equity, Wharton, international portfolios. Mom's already planning the wedding. I was standing in the bedroom staring at my gray blazer hanging on the closet door. My laptop sat open on the bed, screen glowing with an email from Crestpoint's acquisition team. Final team roster attached. I should have opened it then. Instead, I put on the same blazer I'd worn for the last 3 Sundays and drove to my parents' parents' house like a man walking into a room where everyone thought they already knew the ending. My mother opened the door before we rang. Pearls. The important pearls. Her eyes did their scan before her smile arrived. Gray again, she said, patting my shoulder like a coat rack. How dependable. A tiny cut wrapped in tissue paper. I'd been unwrapping those my whole life. In the living room, Grant rose from the sofa in a suit that cost more than my first server rack. Beside him stood Camille Hartwell. Beautiful in a packaged way. Blowout that didn't move. Cream silk. Jewelry that was quiet in the way only expensive things are quiet. A tan that said either somewhere warm recently or money spent to look like it. Her handshake was cool and practiced. My mother took her coat personally, which she had never once done for Becca. My father came in with scotch already poured and gave Camille the warm double clasp of the hand he saved for people he considered consequential. Crest Point Capital, my father said, like he was tasting something excellent. Grant tells us you're with Crest Point, among other things, Camille said smoothly. The name moved through me like cold air under a door. Crest Point had occupied 5 months of my life. I knew their managing director kept reading glasses pushed up into her hair and tapped her pen twice before making a point. I knew their junior analyst asked the sharpest questions in every meeting. I had sat in their conference rooms. I had argued with their legal team about escrow language. I did not know Camille Hartwell. I said nothing. I filed it. I watched. Dinner began with butternut soup. Camille praised the seasoning. My mother practically glowed. Camille spoke in the language of people who have learned that sounding large is easier than being substantial. Leverage, optimization, strategic repositioning, cross-sector synergies, words that landed impressively and meant nearly nothing. My father leaned forward. My mother refilled Camille's wine before it was half empty. Grant laughed at her jokes a beat before the punchline. Becca tried once. My 4th graders are doing a bridge building unit, she said. Some of them designed trusses better than the example in the textbook. That's sweet, my mother said, already rotating back toward Camille. Now, you were saying about your acquisition pipeline. Becca's shoulders dropped half an inch. I felt the familiar anger stir somewhere low in my chest. Then, Camille turned to me. So, Nolan, she said, with the smile of a woman offering charity, tell me about your little computer world. The dining room felt suddenly colder. She explained my profession to me between bites of my mother's expensive pork loin. Tech support is necessary, obviously, she said, but real value gets created above that level. Capital, positioning, deal flow. Deals usually run on software, I said, a nervous laugh around the table. My mother rescued her with smooth speed. Nolan has always preferred stability. He's not a risk taker. My father nodded something about temperament. Grant gave me the sympathetic smile I hated most, the one that said he forgave me for being unimpressive. Becca stared at her plate. Camille called my blazer sensible, then timeless, then refreshingly humble. Each word a smaller box to put me in. She told Becca she should leave teaching for corporate training. Same skills, better compensation, and laughed lightly when Becca said she loved her classroom. Of course, passion is lovely, until the roof needs replacing. My fork clicked against the plate. Becca's hand landed on my knee under the table. Not comfort, containment. Dessert came, creme brulee and my mother's ramekins. She named the pastry shop before anyone had lifted a spoon. I sat with cooling coffee and watched a woman spend 2 hours using money as a measuring tape. And I measured the distance between who I was at that table and who I was every other hour of my life. Then came the accent. Quaint, Camille said, in a heartland kind of way. Everyone laughed. My father, who used to stop me mid-sentence at this same table when I was 13 and make me repeat words until they came out flat because he said I sounded like the feed store. My mother, Grant. The whole warm-lit room agreeing, without saying it, that I was the local color at a table that had outgrown me. Becca squeezed my hand. Don't make a scene. I looked at her. She was pale, not embarrassed for Camille, for me, for what I might do to disturb the polished cruelty everyone had agreed to call dinner. Something inside me went very quiet, not broken. Quiet. Broken things fall apart. Quiet things pay attention. Then Camille leaned back with her wine glass and said the thing. Speaking of real value, I'm in the middle of a major acquisition right now. Logistics software company. Root something. My pulse didn't race. It dropped. The platform's decent, she continued. Mid-tier freight tech, of all things. We're planning to restructure leadership, clean up the tech stack, cut the redundancies, and flip it inside 2 years. These founders never understand what they're sitting on. They stumble into product market fit, and then people like us come in and professionalize it. The spoon in my hand went still over the creme brulee. Root something. My company. My mother's eyes shone with admiration. My father leaned forward asking about timelines. 90 days, Camille said. Fast, close. People like us. Founders like me. I looked around the table. My mother enchanted. My father impressed. Grant glowing over his selection. Becca politely lost. Nobody knew that the woman performing a deal she had no part in was talking about the 38 employees I had hired one nervous interview at a time, the 200 clients I had won, the product I had written ugly first drafts of in my kitchen in an old hoodie. But I knew, and for the first time all night, I smiled for myself. Camille. My voice went through the room the way a chair scraping tile goes through a quiet restaurant. Every head turned. Even the candle flames seemed to steady. Camille blinked. Yes? Which firm did you say you're with? She recovered smoothly. Crestpoint Capital Partners. And you're leading the Routeline acquisition? That's right. Amused now. Why, do you know somebody there? Grant laughed under his breath. My mother fired a look at me that meant, do not embarrass this family in front of her. Becca shifted in her seat. I set my spoon down. The silver made one small final sound against the ramekin. Something like that, I said. I opened my phone. I had organized the folders months ago. Crestpoint due diligence, acquisition team, legal correspondence, public filings. My fingers moved through them without hurrying. I found the team roster, official Crestpoint letterhead, dated that week. Every person involved in the Routeline negotiations. I turned the screen toward Camille. That's strange, I said, because I'm the founder and CEO of Routeline Systems. I've been negotiating with Crestpoint for 5 months, and your name isn't on the acquisition team. The silence was the kind that happens when something expensive breaks in another room. Camille's smile didn't vanish immediately. It held first, then began cracking at the edges, the way ice cracks from the center outward before anything actually falls in. My mother stared at me like I had started speaking another language. My father's eyes dropped to the phone. Grant said, "What?" in barely a whisper. Becca stopped moving entirely. I scrolled. Managing director, legal counsel, analysts, technical review team, integration consultants. I looked up. No Camille Hartwell. She cleared her throat. Acquisition structures are complicated. Not everyone appears on every internal document. These aren't internal summaries, I said. These are the official rosters sent directly to me as CEO. The flush rose up through the tan. I opened the second document. Also, according to public records, you haven't worked at Crestpoint in 7 months. My mother's wine glass trembled. A thin red line slipped down the bowl and touched her finger. Camille's voice changed register. Lost the velvet. You have no idea what you're talking about. I turned the screen toward the whole table. Employment separation disclosure, I said. Filed after Crestpoint removed her for cause, misrepresenting deal involvement, falsifying client reports, claiming credit for acquisitions she had no role in. Grant made a sound I had never heard from him. Small, punctured, like air, leaving something that had been inflated for years. Camille stood, her chair scraping hard against the floor. That is completely out of context. What context makes fraud acceptable? I asked. Nobody laughed. The candles kept burning. The old radiator ticked. Outside, a car passed on the wet street, tires whispering over pavement. The ordinary world continued while the carefully constructed one at this table came apart at the seam. My father read the document on my phone with the concentration of a man watching his own judgment collapse in real time. You said you were a managing director, Grant whispered. You said you got promoted in the spring. Camille reached for his arm. Grant, babe, don't. He pulled back. Don't call me that. She turned to my parents then, desperate. Mrs. Whitmore, I can explain. Nolan is clearly emotional. Maybe he misread something. I laughed. It surprised everyone, including me. I built the company you just called mid-tier, I said. I wrote the first code at my kitchen table. I survived 52 investor rejections. I know every person on that acquisition team, down to which analyst keeps protein bars in his laptop bag because diligence meetings run long. I leaned forward. You don't get to sit in my mother's house, mock my work, mock my wife's classroom, mock my voice, and then wear my company like a costume. Camille looked at Becca then, last resort. Another quiet spouse to smooth it over. Becca looked away. My mother stood. Her chair barely made a sound. She didn't need volume. Diane Whitmore had run rooms for 30 years on atmosphere alone. Get out of my house, she said. Diane, please. Now. Camille looked at Grant one last time. He was gripping the back of his chair, knuckles white, staring at a spot on the tablecloth like the evening might reassemble itself if he didn't move. She grabbed her coat and her little quiet jewelry and walked to the front door. It opened. It closed. And in the silence after, every person at that table turned and looked at me. For 31 years, I had been furniture at that table. Now I was the only thing in the room. Nobody spoke for a long moment. My father missed his glass, pouring the scotch. Amber ran over his hand and he didn't notice. Grant stared at the empty doorway. The hallway clock ticked with the specific obscenity of sound continuing when everything else has stopped. You're the CEO, my mother said. Yes. Of the company she was talking about? Yes. My father looked up. What's the valuation? Of course. Numbers first. Feelings later, if at all. Between 45 and 70 million, I said, depending on which structure we accept. The word million moved across the table like weather nobody had dressed for. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked. I looked at her carefully. There were so many answers. Because you called me steady like it was a consolation prize. Because Dad interrupted me every time I talked about anything real. Because Grant's watch got more follow-up questions than my career. Because the one time I mentioned building something of my own, you told me stability suited me, which was your way of saying ambition didn't. I gave her the cleanest true thing I had. You never asked. She flinched. clenched. Good. Some truths should land before they're softened. Becca reached for my hand under the table. This time I moved mine away. She noticed. Her face shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. Nolan, she whispered. I need air. The hallway was colder. I walked past the family photos in their silver frames. Grant at his college graduation. Grant at the club championship. Grant shaking hands with the mayor at a ribbon cutting. I was in some of them, technically, at the edge, half turned, a shoulder in the background of my own family. Becca followed me to the front entry. Can we talk? I faced her under the chandelier, the one my mother called understated, even though it was roughly the size of a satellite. You told me not to make a scene, I said. She closed her eyes. I know. A woman was mocking me in front of my entire family. I panicked. You always panic here. Your family makes me feel like I'm nothing. Something cold moved through me. And your solution was to help them make me nothing too? Her mouth opened, then closed. The first honest thing she'd done all night. I didn't know, she said quietly. About the company. Not really. You knew enough to ask. I thought you'd tell me when you were ready. No, I said. You thought that not asking meant you never had to know. There's a difference. Her eyes went wet. That's not fair. Fair? I looked at her. I spent 4 years defending you to the people in that room. I told myself you were gentle, not weak. But tonight I understood something. You weren't just avoiding conflict. You were protecting your seat at the table. A quiet husband made your fear look like peace. A quiet husband never forced you to choose. That's not true. Then why was your first instinct to silence me instead of her? She looked toward the dining room, then back at me. The answer was all over her face. My mother appeared at the end of the hallway, her face bare in a way I had never seen it, even with the makeup still on. Nolan, please stay. I looked from her to Becca to the dining room where the plates sat half-finished and cooling. For once, nobody was directing me. For once, they were waiting. I picked up my coat. No, I said. Where are you going? Becca asked. I opened the front door. Cold air rushed in, smelling like wet leaves and distance. Somewhere I don't have to be small. I stepped outside alone. The whole house behind me went quiet. I drove without music. The roads were slick and black under the streetlights. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything familiar. I didn't go home. Home was where Becca would follow, apologize, make tea, and try to convert one clear truth into a complicated conversation. I didn't have the strength to comfort her through the consequences of hurting me. I checked into a hotel downtown on my business account. Citrus cleaner and fresh flowers in the lobby. A woman at the desk handed me a key card like I was anyone else. No history, no expectations, no, oh, you're Grant's brother. And that almost undid me more than anything at that table had. Just my name, room 1412. I stood in the elevator watching the numbers climb in red light while my phone buzzed continuously. Mom, Dad, Grant, Becca, unknown number. Becca again. I turned it face down on the hotel desk, sat on the edge of the bed in my undershirt, and cried in the specific ugly way I never let myself cry around other people. Mouth open, one hand pressed flat against my sternum, because grief has a body, and mine had been carrying too much of it for too long. I cried for the kid who practiced flattening his vowels at the bathroom mirror, because his father said people noticed. I cried for every dinner where I laughed at jokes aimed at me just to keep the evening smooth. I cried for 4 years of believing that a wife who loved me quietly in private was enough, even when she wouldn't defend me in public. And somewhere under all of it, quieter than the rest, I cried because the version of tonight I had imagined for years, the one where my family finally saw me, had actually happened. And it hadn't felt like being seen. It had felt like being appraised. Around midnight, I checked the phone. Becca had sent 11 messages. I'm sorry, please tell me where you are. I was wrong. I love you. We can fix this. That last one made me colder than the rain outside. She still thought this was a crack to seal, a scene to clean up. My mother's messages were shorter, building towards something. The last one said simply, I'm sorry. No decoration. No, I'm sorry you felt that way. No, I'm sorry dinner got tense. Just, I'm sorry. I looked at it for a long time and felt nothing unlock. Then at 6:04 a.m., Callum called. Callum Reyes, my co-founder, the only person who had been in the room for every crisis, every near miss, every night we almost quit. He never called before 7 unless something was on fire. You're trending, he said. I sat up. Someone had posted about the dinner. No video, but enough detail. Quiet tech CEO exposes fraud girlfriend at family dinner. It was everywhere. She's already trying to spin it, Callum said, and she's using Becca's name. Camille's statement wasn't official, but it was efficient. The kind of damage that doesn't need a press release, just the right finance gossip account and a screenshot from someone close to the family. The post said the dinner had been misunderstood, that I was emotionally unstable, and that my own wife had privately apologized for my behavior. My behavior. Becca called before I could call her. I answered. Tell me you didn't talk to Camille, I said. Silence. That was how I knew. She'd taken the call late that night, she said. She didn't know what Camille wanted. Camille was in tears. Becca had only said that things got out of control. Out of control. Another soft phrase laid over a hard fact. Did you apologize for me? I said you'd been under a lot of pressure. I laughed once without humor. Camille had spent one evening mocking me. Becca had spent 4 years asking me to absorb it. And when the truth finally cost someone else something, my wife's first instinct had been to soften soften the landing. For her, not for me. I want you moved out before I come back, I said. Nolan, please. I'm not doing this. I'm recognizing what's already been done. Her voice cracked. I love you. I know. But your love has always arrived after the damage. She was crying now. I could picture her at our kitchen table, hair loose, hand over her face, the kettle cooling untouched beside her. Once that image would have pulled me back like a tide. Let me fix it, she said. You can start by telling the truth publicly. Post that you never apologized for my behavior because I did nothing wrong. Say Camille lied. Say you failed your husband. Use plain words. Silence. Her terror of plain words. I thought so, I said, and hung up. By 9, I was in Callum's office in yesterday's shoes and a spare jacket his assistant kept for emergencies. It smelled like dry cleaning and spearmint gum. Callum slid coffee across the desk. You look like you won a war and haven't slept since. Accurate. Crestpoint called. They're concerned about the noise around the deal. Camille created the fraud risk, not me. I told them exactly that, and they want reassurance on leadership stability. I looked through the glass wall at our team moving through the open floor. Sadie at the front desk. The dev cluster gathered around one monitor. Morning Sun on the Rootline logo we had printed ourselves at a copy shop because we couldn't afford real signage. Leadership stability. I had built stability with shaking hands at a kitchen table in a hoodie while my family called me boring. Schedule the call, I said. You sure? No, but I'm done letting other people narrate me. Before the Crestpoint call, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your mother and I are coming to your office. We need to talk. The elevator doors opened beyond the glass before I could answer. My parents stepped out together, moving through my company's lobby like people who still expected rooms to rearrange themselves. My mother held her purse in both hands. My father's jaw was set. For the first time in 31 years, I did not stand up to greet them. They looked smaller in my office than they ever had in their house. At home, they had the advantage of chandeliers. Wine poured before anyone could decline it. 30 years of careful staging that said this family has substance and taste. Here, under clean office light, with my company's name on the wall behind me, they looked like visitors who had gotten off on the wrong floor. My father noticed the logo first. His eyes stayed on it half a second too long. My mother noticed the employees, the glass conference rooms, the people doing real work in real time, and I watched her understand, piece by piece, that this was not a lucky accident or a little side project she'd been charitable about. This was 38 people. This was alive. Sit down, I said. My mother's lips parted. I had never spoken to her that way. Not rudely, not loudly, just directly. She sat. My father stayed standing. This is getting out of hand. Which part? The attention, the gossip, the reputational risk. To whom? His jaw tightened. To everyone. Be specific. My mother put a hand on his sleeve. He exhaled through his nose. To the family, he said. There it was. Not my reputation. Not my company. Not the fact that a stranger had publicly smeared me and my own wife had helped her sand the edges off. The family. The old god. I have a Crestpoint call in 20 minutes, I said. So choose carefully. Are you here as my parents or as damage control for the Whitmore name? My mother's voice shook when she answered. As your parents. My father looked at the floor. I waited. Finally, he sat. We failed you. My mother didn't look away when she said it. I spent years making you feel like less because you didn't perform success in a way I recognized. I called you steady when I meant safe. I was proud of Grant for being impressive and never noticed that both of you were performing for me instead of living. My father rubbed his face. He looked older than he had 48 hours earlier. I undervalued my own son, he said quietly. I price risk for a living and I got this one completely wrong. Something in my chest ached, not opened, just ached. I believe you're sorry, I said. My mother reached across the desk for my hand. I moved mine away before she got there. Her face crumpled. But sorry doesn't reinstall me into the family as it was, I said. I'm not coming back to Sunday dinners where a few tears erase 31 years. I'm not becoming your redemption story. I'm not proof that you're better now. We don't expect that, she whispered. You do. You just don't know it yet. My father looked at me with something I didn't recognize at first. Then I did. It was the look of a man who has spent his whole life asking the wrong questions and has just noticed. What do you want? He said. Callum held up 2 fingers through the glass. Crestpoint in 15. Distance, I said. Stop calling because you're uncomfortable with the consequences of your own choices. Let Grant figure out who he is without using me as a measuring stick. Don't talk about me at the club to your friends, to anyone. When you've done that long enough to mean it, I'll let you know. And Becca, my mother asked. The name entered the room like smoke. I've asked her to move out. My father frowned. Divorce is a serious step. So is 4 years of public cowardice. Sadie knocked on the glass. Crestpoint's ready. I stood. My parents stood automatically. Reflex. From a lifetime of rooms they ran. My father looked toward the conference room, then back at me. Are you going to be all right? For once, the question sounded real. Not an evaluation. Not doubt. Just a father. Frightened. I picked up my laptop. I already was, I said. You just didn't know. Camille's email to Crestpoint had gone out that morning. Subject line, formal clarification regarding false allegations. She claimed she had consulted informally on the Rootline deal, that I had misread casual dinner conversation, that her separation from Crestpoint was mutual and unrelated to ethics. And then, her worst move, the one that would cost her everything, she suggested that that Rootline's leadership might be unstable because its CEO had allowed a personal family conflict to bleed into professional judgment. Renata, my attorney, joined by video from Chicago and read it on screen with the expression of a woman who genuinely enjoys this part of the job. Good, she said. Callum looked at her. Good? She put it in writing. Nadia Brandt appeared on the CrestPoint screen, reading glasses pushed up into her hair, blue notebook, pen tapping twice before she spoke. Nolan, we received Ms. Hartwell's email, and I want to be clear before anything else. CrestPoint has no ongoing relationship with Camille Hartwell. She was terminated for cause. Then I need that in writing, I said. Today. I also need written confirmation that she had no role, formal or informal, in the Rootline acquisition. I need CrestPoint to notify every recipient of her email that her statements are false. And I want a revised indemnity clause protecting Rootline from any liability connected to her misrepresentations. Callum glanced at me sideways with something close to pride. Nadia studied me through the screen. That's a significant set of requests. So is being dragged into a fraud narrative by your former employee. A faint smile. Fair. We negotiated for 40 minutes. Not begging, not reacting, negotiating. When the call ended, Renata leaned toward her camera. And your wife? She knew. Good lawyers hear the unsaid. She's moving out today. Do you want a referral? Send it. That evening, I went back to the apartment with Callum waiting downstairs in the car. The hallway smelled like somebody else's garlic dinner. My key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, 2 suitcases stood by the door. Becca was in the living room, holding the framed photo from our courthouse wedding. Me laughing, tie crooked. Her looking up at me like the world had narrowed itself down to one person. Grief hit me so hard I almost sat down on the floor. I posted, she said. I checked my phone. My husband did nothing wrong. Camille Hartwell lied. I failed to defend Nolan when he deserved it, and I am ashamed of that. Thousands of likes already. Public. Specific. Exactly what I had asked for. Still late. Always late. I'll do counseling, she said. I'll stand up to your family. I'll never ask you to be quiet again. I looked around the apartment. The chipped mug. The stack of 4th grade science tests. The little basil plant dying on the windowsill because we always forgot to water it until it was nearly too late. This had been my life. Not all bad. That's what made leaving harder, not less necessary. You're promising to be someone I needed 4 years ago, I said. She cried quietly. I could see her trying not to. Once that would have been enough to pull me back. Do you hate me? She asked at the door. No, I said, and meant it completely. I just don't choose you anymore. The door closed. The apartment went quiet. Then Camille's number sent a message from an unknown line. You think you won? You have no idea what I can still take from you. I screenshotted it, forwarded it to Renata, blocked the number. She called in under a minute. Don't respond. I didn't. People like Camille run on private shame, she said. You are no longer private. By morning, CrestPoint had issued their statement. CrestPoint Capital Partners confirms that Camille Hartwell is not employed by the firm, has no role in any current transaction involving Rootline Systems, and is not authorized to represent CrestPoint in any capacity. Clean, final, public. Camille's consulting website disappeared by that afternoon. Her profile went dark. Former colleagues stopped returning her calls. A finance newsletter picked up the story and ran it under a headline that required no editorializing at all. By 3 o'clock, Grant texted me a screenshot of Camille trying to reach him 14 times. Did you answer? I asked. No. Then, I wanted to. Not because I miss her. Because I want to know how I was stupid enough to believe her. You weren't stupid. I wrote back. You were trained to value the packaging over the person. We both were. He didn't reply for a while. Then, I'm sorry I laughed at dinner. That apology landed differently than my parents had. Less polished. Less desperate to be forgiven. I typed back. I know. Not, I forgive you. Not, it's fine. Because it wasn't fine. But it was honest. And honest was the only currency I had any use for now. 3 weeks later, the CrestPoint terms changed. They came back stronger. But I no longer wanted to sell control. Not completely. The noise had brought attention. New customers, new investors, and something I hadn't expected. Emails from founders who wrote at midnight saying, I thought I was the only one whose family had no idea. The platform that had started as ugly code on a kitchen table was finally being seen at full size. So I negotiated a growth partnership instead. Capital without surrender. Expansion without erasure. At the final meeting, Nadia Brandt said, you realize most founders would have taken the original number and walked. I spent too long being walked over, I said. I'm not selling my company just to become a footnote in someone else's portfolio. She smiled. Then let's build. The deal closed in December. No Camille. No family spectacle. No wife beside me for the photos. Just me and Callum and our legal team and 38 employees cheering across the open floor when I walked out holding the signed documents. Sadie from the front desk popped grocery store champagne because that's what we had in the fridge. Somebody played music too loud. Callum hugged me hard enough that my ribs complained. You did it, he said. Through Through the glass wall, I could see snow starting to fall over the city. I had spent years imagining that success would feel like applause from the people who doubted me. Vindication, delivered at volume. It didn't feel like that. It felt like keys in my own hand. When my mother texted, "We are so proud of you, son," I looked at the screen for a long time. "Thank you," I wrote back. Nothing more. Because pride, like love, means something different when it only shows up after proof. By January, my life was unrecognizable in quiet ways. A new place 15 minutes from the office, high enough up that traffic sounded like weather. The first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived. Takeout noodles from the carton, snow blurring the city lights beyond the window. No one to tell me not to make trouble, no one to be disappointed by the size of my voice. The silence felt strange at first, then it felt clean. Becca signed the separation papers in February. We met at the coffee shop near the courthouse where we used to buy cinnamon rolls after dentist appointments, because adulthood deserved small rewards. She had cut her hair in a way that didn't suit her. She told me she was in counseling, that she was learning how much of herself she had organized around avoiding conflict. "If I had defended you that night," she said, "would we still be married?" I watched the steam rise off my cup. "No," I said. She looked startled. "That night didn't create the problem," I said. "It just turned the lights on." She nodded slowly, each word landing like something she had already suspected and hoped wasn't true. "I hope you're happy someday," she said. "I hope you become brave before someone else needs you to be." We walked out separately. The bell over the door rang once for her, then once for me. The final email came on a gray Tuesday from Owen, my divorce attorney. Finalized. Documents attached. I sat on the edge of the bed. No tears came. Just one long, steady breath. I thought about the gray blazer, the creme brulee going cold in its ramekin, Camille's face draining behind her tan, Becca's whisper, my mother's laughter, my father's silence. Then I thought about my name on those signed documents. My team. 38 employees who had built something real with me, while my own family thought I reset passwords. They all thought I had nothing. No power, no edges, no story worth asking about. They were wrong. I had built a company in silence. Then I built a life out loud. And this time, nobody else got to decide how much space I was allowed to take up.